like it. Well, good morning, all of you. Hope hope things are treating you well so far. It's good to be able to see you here on this nice morning. After everything is seemingly frozen and uh, ceased to function properly, it seems like. It's always the first time of the year I find whenever when everything actually freezes. Some stuff just stops working, and you have to figure it out now. I was wanting to start. I'd like to start it off by asking all of you, what kind of music do y'all listen to? What kind of things do you like? Just to get thoughts going and questions rolling. Sorry, say again. Country. Good choice there. That's a good choice. Classic. Good choice. For me personally, I'm a delight to my parents in being a pretty devout metalhead. And something they always tell me is it's just noise. Oh, it's just noise. And while some of it, yes, I agree, would be probably just noise. It's something that I've always personally enjoyed. But something I always think of is how the world is really that noisy. Everything going on at once, everything spinning around, going crazy. I mean, just recently had one crazy election, as well as stuff like social media. And for me personally, I'm a college student, so everything revolves around what I need to get done this week. Trying to plan out. I have one thing this week, this thing next week. I have to study for this, get ready for this. Make sure that everything is good to go for whenever I have the next week coming up. But in light of all that noise, I find that the world becomes divided because of all that noise. I mean, one group of people trying to talk louder than the other group of people, or one or the other group of people, or everybody just being divided and divided and divided. And while that's happening, I would like to remind you how we're not part of this world, but the next. But what is always the best way to? It's always ask the question, what's the best way to be able to cut out that noise? Be able to do that. And I'd like to ask you, what do you find personally noisy in your guys' lives? Work. That's a good one. I couldn't imagine. I'm not a parent, so I couldn't even begin to think how busy that ends up getting. Yeah. The more little, the more literal approach, yes. Well, something I find to be the most important thing to be able to cut all that noise is being able to have that own quiet time, that one-on-one time with you and God. It's always the most important thing, being able to stop, cut everything out, and be able to personally spend one-on-one time with just you, God, and His Word, or however else you're wanting to spend time with Him. There are five big reasons why spending time with Him as important as it is, other than the obvious being that He's the one who created us. And I find keeping these things in mind at the end of the day can make them more time with God more meaningful, rewarding, and feel like you had spent quality time being able to sit down and more or less disconnect from the world and be able to learn something or feel like you're doing the right thing, spending time with God. And I would next like to ask you all that what reasons do you feel that it's important to have fellowship with God? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Hmm. I can agree with that there. Once again, me personally, trying to plan out doing stuff for like Christmas and making sure everything's working out. Then once again, college student trying to figure out the best way to be able to get gifts for people with what you have at the moment. I could definitely agree there. Anybody else? Exactly. Yes. Being able to see what the most or what I'd say the most important thing is. Yes. Well, starting off with those 5 reasons. Oh, back. The first one being is that how we are created by God to have fellowship with Him. We are made in His own image, and I feel like the biggest thing that God wants from us is that time with Him. Genesis 1:27 speaks on how we're created, saying, "So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them." Later on in 2:7, it also says, "Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into the nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being." And skipping all the way to the end of the Bible in Revelations 3:20, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me." All we have to do is really reach out and take that time to spend time with God to be able to more or less properly enjoy that time. I like to ask, in what ways do you see we are created to have fellowship with God? I know exactly what you're talking about. There's one preacher I like to follow on Instagram. I know his first name is last name I might butcher. It's Cliff Knutley or something like that. I I'm butchering his last name. His son had a thing on that exact kind of thing of how Christians altogether have like a happier, less stressed, more relaxed outlook not only on life but on the things that go on around them. Every like everything that ever ends up coming up usually is a lot less stress, and they feel more rewarded in the things that are due. So I know exactly what you're talking about there. You had something to say, April? Mm-hmm. 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 And, yeah, yeah, we're going. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I feel like once again, we as people were created to have that sort of mindset and that drive to go be that way, be not only social with each other but social with God. Okie dokie. So, next week's reason I'd like to touch on is how Jesus' death allowed us to personally have fellowship with Him. And touching on that, I've noticed that nowadays a lot of like outside denominations have to have some sort of middlemen to get between you and God. You have to have somebody right in the middle, and which me personally I feel is kind of, I don't know, if in that sort of situation it'd feel like if anything happens I wouldn't be able to get to God. But it reminds me of how like the temple curtains were torn to get rid of anything that goes between us and God. And I'd like to touch on 1 Corinthians 9, 1 9, where it says that God is faithful, who has called you into fellowship with his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. We all are able to get into touch with God because of Jesus' death. We are able to, at any time, be able to sit down, pray, talk to God, be able to enjoy that time with them because of Jesus' death. Okay, and the next point I'd like to touch on is how the strongest in the faith that we observe are able or had the habit of being able to spend that time one-on-one with God and be as strong as they were, to where we read about them now in the Bible. People like Abraham, Paul, David, Daniel, and Moses, all of them, they had the habit of being one-on-one with God and being able to overcome the obstacles they had. I mean, for example, with Daniel, the obstacle he had being in the lion's den, that one-on-one time with God that whole time has kept him safe from the lion's den. When they rolled the stone over, hey, I'm still here. The lions you tried to get to kill me didn't kill me because my Lord is stronger. And examples like David, with all the things that he had to struggle with things like Saul or the sins he had, that one-on-one time with God slowly gave him the name of the man after God's own heart. And I'd like to ask all of you if you could think of anybody else in the Bible, outside the Bible, in your personal lives, who you know as being the strongest Christians or the strongest in the faith in general, who has that really good habit of having that time with God. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know growing up in the church too, my parents and grandparents both are in that case with me of being more or less model Christians in my life. Anybody else? Okie dokie. Okay, and the next point I'd like to make is how you expect to be a strong, healthy Christian without spending time with God. And with that, I'd like to take a look at Matthew 4:4, where it says, Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." The relationship you have with God is like oxygen to your body. If you can't breathe, how do you expect to live? And it's the same instance of how if you can't breathe, how do you expect to live? With your spirit, if you don't have a relationship with God, how do you expect to live with your spirit? And I always try to, when I work on things like this, I like to think of more of that personal example, and I like to think of with your spirit being like working out or going to the gym. If you don't work on your quote-unquote spiritual muscles, how do you expect them to grow and be strong themselves? If you never work them out, you're never going to be strong enough for the task at hand. Something's going to come up, and your faith won't be strong enough. You waver, not be able to just do whatever comes up and be effective in that sense. And it also means you might not be able to strong enough to defend yourself properly. Let's say somebody else comes along who wants to be more than critical about your faith and try to get you to waver in it. How do you expect to be effective in your own faith if you don't have the spiritual muscles ready to defend your faith? And it's the same deal with the devil himself. It says that the devil is like a lion waiting for its prey, ready to come along. And I thought, personally, it's like we're the giraffes here. in a sense, out in Africa. You know the way giraffes defend themselves against lion is that they give a big old swift kick and then run whenever there's something that comes along, or whenever a lion comes to try to cull them out. And if we don't have the spiritual muscles to give that swift kick and run whenever something like that comes along in our lives that want to try and come and waver our faith, then how do we, if we don't have all the time spent to be able to be strong like that, how do we expect to be able to be effective in our faith in defending it? And I feel like Psalms 119:9 says as well, where how can a young person stay on the path of purity? By live according to your word. Next, so how would we want to be able to create a healthy, strong, effective relationship with God and with daily time being spent with Him? So for me personally, at the beginning of this year, I had a big, more or less a struggle with my own personal faith and things I believed in. Had some people come into my life it was an instance where they're willing to they're going to start challenging me on my own faith, and it came to a realization that I know a lot of people who were born into the church. I mean, I have not spent a day in my life where I haven't lived in the church with my family and stuff like that, but a lot of issues that come along with that is that people's faith becomes something like their parents, where they're in charge of their own faith and making sure they're coming to church on time, doing everything right. And you learn everything, but you don't, it's not, in a sense, yours in a sense. So I had that kind of instance where I realized when people are coming into my life where it's, where they were trying to get me to waver in my own faith, what am I defending? What am I trying to figure out? And through finding different ways to be able to defend that and protect, more or less protect my own faith, being able to get through problems like that. And a good place to always start is trying to find ways to have daily quiet time with God Himself. Being able to stop, set aside some time and keep just a time one-on-one with you and God in His Word. And I like to propose that it's with most people and most instances, the best time to be able to do that is just right when you wake up in the morning. Get up and being able to, when you're at your best, at your strongest, be able to spend time with God and, be able to see, enjoy, or just be able to get to know what God has to say and things like that right at the beginning of the day. It shows that it's your biggest priority, that God is on the first time, like right at the top of your list, the first thing that happens when you wake up in your day. And it just allows you to be, when you're at the most rested, at your just at the most rested, being able to be the most effective you are. And going back to people who are the strongest in their own faith in the Bible, like I was saying with Abraham, David, Moses, Job, and even Jesus, the time they spent to be most effective was right at the beginning of the day, just starting everything off with that. And once again, it's one of the with that morning time, it showed they did it showing that it was their first priority and their strongest when they're doing it at their strongest, doing that then. And I would like to ask with some of you all, just out of curiosity, what times do you feel like it's you doing it or spending time in God's Word? It's the best time for you all. What times do you enjoy doing it? Yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, yeah, the morning because your thoughts are you're clear versus cluttered, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a parent, but I know the parents, the kids will come in, and all of a sudden I'm focused on their thoughts, right? Or people in our life. Um, so to be able to not have that and then turn into excuse like, well, I was gonna get around to you, but thoughts is a biggie. It just gets too cluttersome. So you got to do it in the beginning of the day, where it's you and him and nobody else. And then you can also be a better person around everybody else too.
Funny you say that. We're going to get to that in not too long.
Oh,
That sort of
okay.
topic.
They're the same. Also, just starting the day with prayer, and you know what you've got coming up for the day. You're more aware of God working through that day because you prayed about it, and so it's in your mind rather than you're all distracted and you don't even like, oh, thank you for letting me get through that, or thank you for helping me be patient when I knew I need that. So it kind of helps the relationship because you're aware because you talked about it with God that morning.
Mm-hmm.
I go along the same lines, I guess, the morning times. And something else that I think about, there's some of the passages where his mercies are new every morning. And I feel like God has, I don't know, created something special about a new day. And it's kind of strange because I don't think time really matters to God all that much. But for us, it seems like he put in place to, all right, today was kind of a wash. Start this new day off, focusing on the things that you should.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of a neat thing to try to, I try to find that, squeeze it in where I can.
It reminds me, it says somewhere, I don't remember exactly where it was in the Bible, but how um, it was, it's not maybe word for word correctly, but how a minute for God's like a minute for God's a year for us, but a year for Him is also like a minute for us, where time is just, God hasn't constrained time. So yeah, that just reminded me of that. And I'm the same with all of you. First thing in the morning, I mean, I try to do it right before I go to work. Whenever I do get up, I mean, for me, I work usually at 5 a.m., so it's usually waking up around um, closer to 4-ish to be able to get ready and also spend that time just before I get started with my day, before everything gets super busy and hectic. Because I feel like that is just getting that done right at the beginning of the day and having that time where it's all entirely quiet. I mean, nobody's really up at 4 in the morning. I'll say that. So it gives the easy part of not having distraction um, to be able, so I can just spend that a little bit of time before I have to get to work, be able to properly enjoy that. And so I would like to talk about some things that it's helpful to for doing in that time. And I always something I've started doing personally was writing stuff down, um, stuff that you can think of. I mean, about a year ago, I started a personal journal of five, writing down every day 5 blessings that happen throughout the day for God that God has given me, as well as something to think on and ask myself, so I can look back later and see like a question and see if I've found something to help answer that question. And another thing I like to propose is finding somebody else to do something like this with, like a study buddy almost, and more or less not relying on them for your faith, but not relying on your faith, but using the two of you keeping each other accountable and keeping one-on-one time between you and God. Me personally, with that is I have a friend who a couple around the beginning of last summer um, was coming more to wanting to learn more about Christ and learn what all that has to mean and to see what the church is about in general. And so she had come to me for that, and we had studied for a while to the point where she had gotten baptized past August. And so having that sort of study buddy not only keeps you accountable to making sure every day you're doing that kind of having that time with God, but it also can help help one another strengthen each other's faith, and by sharing, well, this is what I had learned during my time studying with God. Um, and this is just how I had done it and be able to get something out of from it. I like to ask what do you all like to do, or more or less other than, or I guess maybe not the more traditional thing of sitting and like just looking through all your entire Bible. Like, what other things do you guys like to do?
I take notes too, but also, you know, and we've talked about this in previous weeks, like the Bible app is so easy to
Mm-hmm.
have friends Bible study. And I've never had anyone tell me no. I've had people not do it. I've had no one directly tell me no. And I mean, I don't know if people are aware, but you can send them like a link to the study, like, hey, I'm doing this study starting at this day. And when they do it, you can write notes back and forth in the thing to each other. And it sends them, hey, so and so, you know, did their lesson, and it's a prompt. So it kind of like create it's just so easy to do, and it's not you having to say, hey, do this to your friend. It's like
Mm-hmm.
they're automatic message. So I don't know. I find this to be really helpful, and um, they've I've kept a lot of friendships that way from people. They're all over the world now that we still do these. So I think it's
That's nice to hear. Yeah, that's neat. Anybody else? Alrighty. And so another thing that's good to think and touch on is how long should time like that be? And if you're starting off with doing something like this daily, it's always the best to try to start small, because I know that, I mean, you're readjusting your schedule to be able to do something like that, and changing things up to be able to work that properly. And so you should always start small and let something like that grow, small enough to where you're not constantly checking the clock, seeing what's what how long have I been doing it? How long if is this long enough? Am I needing to do this more? Um, am I needing to make sure I have all if I'm doing more or less a quota of time? It needs to be authentic and honest to whatever you have going. So if you're doing something later on and you're thinking, I have this time now, I want to spend time with God, if that's the authentic and honest amount of time, that's what you should go for. And you should emphasize quality over quantity. So making sure you have that good proper time that you're able to do, or more or less be as effective as you are in doing that. Because at the end of the day, you're not really going to learn something or feel rewarded and feeling like you're checking off a box like it's a chore almost. If you are doing it to where you are learning something and having that quality time, then you're more likely to get something personally out of that. Any thoughts along with that? Yes.
one of the things I do sometimes. When you say check a box, like you're trying to like look through as much as I can, and you're really not gaining.
Mm-hmm.
But like again, the Bible app will have a verse of the day, and you just read it and you try to think, what is this really saying? And you can click buttons as whole chapter, and then you get more of the context, and it's not a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but you're really focusing on it, and that's something that I do that kind of helps me say, you know, it's quality over quantity, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
really actually gaining insight of what this one verse means. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Next big point I like to make is trying to find a special place, a place for you yourself to go and enjoy that time with God. Um, and a good example of that has always been Jesus. He's had multiple different places where he spent one-on-one time with God. Matthew 6:7 says, "But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who's in the secret place, and your Father who sees you will reward you openly." And while that verse is more about not making not making your faith something like a spectacle for everybody to see. I feel it also gives a good premise of having that personal place and that personal space where it's just you and God outside of the world, that you can just have enjoying that time. And Mark 1:35 says, very early in the morning when it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And that key factor to that place is solitude, where you are not interrupted by you and God, from any. You're not interrupted by anything else from that time you have with you and God. And because I feel like if you're doing that, and just wherever you feel like, distractions can creep in. And just as you were saying, April, that people can come and distract you, and you can start saying, well, I was going to go do this, but now I don't, this came up and I had to do this. You had that ability, and you've given yourself all the time and, like I said, like saying, the place to spend that time with just you and God. I would like to ask, though, do any of you have any special places? I know personally I like to do it, I know Ivadale is one of those big special places for me personally, but it's not always available. So for me, it's always just been kind of off my room and stuff like that. I like to ask, does anybody have any special places they like to spend time with God?
Well, just in my room, I
Yeah.
have this nice chair my mom blessed me with, and it was ottoman things, and I be able to hold up the Bible. So I don't know how to say it. It goes on your lap really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that, and the view is great for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I'll always have that. I might be buried someday and all that. So then I'll get back to you. I'm like, my room's a little this chair.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine the window. I can imagine that once you have kids and stuff like that, that special place can always end up changing, because from what I've heard. Yes? Whatever place is comfortable. Is most available, yep. I remember, Jesus had stuff like the Mount Olives, and he went on his own. I wonder how long it had to have been to go up to the entire mountain and just spend time and come back down. But also, there's also the garden where I remember he would go, and there's another example of like an entirely solitary place that he would go and spend time with God. It was just one of those. He always had those. It seemed like those places where he was able to do that, and it's kind of also an example. As long as has that example of solitude, that place could be anywhere. As long as has that solitude and has that ability to I get more or less. What's the best word to describe it? More, just more intimate. Yes, thank you. Exactly. Alrighty. Next thing just as I was saying, is it's important to being able to disconnect entirely from the world. I know stuff. For your phone, for example, is designed to take up as much of your attention as it can. Social media itself. It seems like I put down my phone, and I wonder if it's hardwired to do this, to go off with some sort of notification about, oh, well, this happened. Try to get you to pick it back up and take a look at, oh, what's happened? What did I miss out on? And it seems like it almost prioritizes on fear of missing out to try to get you back on. But it's more as social media gets more and more prevalent, I feel like it's also more and more important to be able to have the control to turn it off, and being able to spend time on what is most important. And as I was, oh, yes?
I just wanted to say, I am very
Mhm.
because I put my phone on silent sometimes.
Mhm.
So I have all the way from maybe 6 to 6:30, all the way to 9. My daughter goes to 7 downstairs.
Mhm.
So we have that much time in the morning to just disconnect from everything. So it's like I keep it as a habit, not until 9 o'clock, not anytime after is fine,
Mhm.
but anytime before that, it's on silent.
That's a helpful thing to do. Keep, I guess
Because
your
otherwise
head's
it's like
exactly.
ping, 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 and you just stop reading, see what it says, and disappear.
Mhm.
But silence makes it so I would, and I leave it on silence behind my head, so I don't hear anything over that.
Mhm.
That would be
It's helpful because your phone has settings you're able to put in to where it says from this time to this time, quiet, nothing. And I feel like that's helpful for being able to disconnect. You had something to say, Dana?
Yeah, just it's a temptation in and of itself to use your phone and all the wonderful apps that are out there for studying the Bible.
Mhm.
And where else can you have like every version you want in the palm of your hand? But that also, it's like you said, it's designed to distract you. It's designed to take your mind away. So I think it's as good of a tool as that is. I think sometimes it hinders us. It's good to just set that, just get back to the standard Bible and use that for your study. Just use your computer or your tablet.
It's funny you mention that because as I've gotten older and gotten out of things like the youth group here, teen group, where it was always said, well, use a paper Bible, bring a paper Bible, and I always thought, well, why can't I use my phone? It's just I have it all the time. It's that easy. Um, and it's one of those things as I've gotten older, realizing, oh no, that's the reason they do that is for that exact reason. Reason that we always say bring a paper Bible is because your phone's designed to distract you and take you out of what is most important. And touching on that is how do you expect to focus on God with those distractions of the world around you? Because once you once you get into the once you get into all of whatever stuff is trying to pull you away from, like your phone's trying to pull you out of, and get into that. I mean, all of a sudden you look and it's 45 minutes later. I mean, that happens to me with college homework. I'll start talking to a friend, and you go down the rabbit hole of either scrolling or just talking and talking, letting yourself get distracted, and all of a sudden the time's gone. Um, and that's another thing I feel like your phones are designed to do is take all that time away from you. That all of a sudden, hey, I'm out of time, and that's just what had happened. The last thing I'd like to touch on is in that time with God, you and God, record and request all of what you had talked with Him about. Thoughts detangle themselves best when they pass through the lips and the fingertips. When you stop, write it down, and make a personal application to whatever you were doing in that moment, you your thoughts are clearer. You know more what you spent time doing. You feel like you've done it right, and that you can come back and know what you spent all that time making sure you're doing. And it's also your chance to go stop and pray. Praying, you have the ability to talk to the one who created everything you see around you. And if you're spending time with him, why wouldn't you want to at least take the time to talk to him? Um, it allows you to be able to not only further your relationship with God, but just know how to end your time properly with him, and just ask for whatever you need. Give some um, being able to just ask what you need, being able to just spend that time the best that you can. And I'd like to end with this discussion asking if Jesus is able to balance private prayer with teaching and fellowship, how are we able to find a similar balance in our own personal lives? like to open up to discussion on things with that. Yes.
I think it comes down to self-discipline. When Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:25, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly, I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after pleasing others, I myself should be disqualified. A lot of times we think of that in kind of the earthly, carnal sense. I've got to discipline and keep myself, from all these other temptations. Your brain's part of your body.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to discipline it too, and all of these things we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yes. So you had something to say?
I think it's just really important in all of these that we remember that we're in a war.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really easy to have, dainty Bible studies or those easy, Bible studies and I think that's when we forget that we are at battle and we are warriors. And if we don't have that, and this is why it's important to have all of these things,
Mm-hmm.
private prayers as a warrior going to God, asking for that personal strength, but then also, the learning from others and the fellowshipping with others who are in this war with us.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just really important, and it goes along with what Dana was saying about self-control
Mm-hmm.
and being self-disciplined.
Yes.
I think it's realizing the importance of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like what they were saying too, with like the discipline. If Jesus found it important enough to do, then maybe there's a little bit more for us to learn of. Maybe we don't have it all as great as we want it. Maybe spending a little bit more time in solitude with God to think about it.
Yes, exactly. True. Well, yes.
Submissiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus was always submitting to his Father in heaven all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're either submitting to family, submitting to jobs. We definitely always do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Submit to what I have to do for work. But he's always like right around, like, okay, God, my Father, what do I do today?
Mm-hmm.
It's always his focus.
Exactly, yes.
Prioritizing.
Yep. Well, it looks like it's all the time we have. I'd like to thank you all for joining this morning. Meet you all in the main room.